Hello, everybody, and happy Friday to everyone. Glad to be here as always with you. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. So, what will I talk about today? Let me think. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about an experience I had the past weekend where I was able to get some time alone in like a cabin out in the woods with just a few dogs and really nobody else there, and not know any kind of internet connection, and just an opportunity just to sit in the quiet for a couple days. And something that came to me when I was sitting there is yeah, I should have let you know. I really didn't know what kind of internet I'd have, but anyway, I was sitting out there, and the two words that came to me were to just be and to only be, and that became my mantra for the weekend, and I just sat there and repeated the word slowly. Just be, only be, just be, only be, just be, only be. And I would say just be, and I'd give it a little bit of a pause and just sit with that and just then say only be, only be. And as I continue to do that, I found myself beginning to be comfortable with just the silence, with just with just presence alone. And so it was like just be. Only be. Just here. Only here. Just now. Only now. And it was a matter of just being without. And I began to understand what Jesus talked about when he said being poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, and this poorness of spirit, this being without, this blessed poverty that leaves one without nothing but the very basic essence, that leaves the heart being pure and pristine and very clear and very bright. To just be without, to just be without a second thought, to be without a divided mind, just to be, and just to be without a name, and have nothing to live up to, no one to impress. Just to be without a belief that weighs the heart down and makes it heavy. Just to be without a desire born of those beliefs that make life heavy. Just to be without a clue. Totally lost in awe and wonder, not having all the answers nor needing to totally be without, just to be without meaning, nor have the need for meaning, to be without meaning and the need for it. You know, to be without concern for what does not concern me. To be without being in other people's business. To be without a yesterday, without any regret. To be without a tomorrow, without all the anticipation and apprehension that goes along with that. To just be in wonder, to just be in awe, to just be in wholeness, sufficient unto myself, to just be loving and peaceful, to just be joyful and righteous, just to be gentle and patient, to be good, faithful, kind, just to be composed, equanimous, balanced, and stable, just to be bright and shining and flowing and quiet, just like light is, just to be soft and vivacious and clear and transparent, just to be these things. Just to be, and just to know that that's enough. That's all that's required. Nothing more is required than just to be. And when you just are, when you just are, then you find you don't need to correct anybody. You don't need to change the world. Nothing needs to be changed. Because it's okay to just be with everything unconditionally. With all the things that are. And nothing more than everything is required for you to be with. Because you are everything. And because you are everything, you have a relationship with all of it. And you really have no choice in this matter. All things are relative. All things are kin. You do not get to choose what you're born with. You and your brother come from the same womb. And even if you disown him, in actuality, he'll always be your brother. Because he was born your brother. And you were born his brothers. You came from the same womb. So, and we all come from the same womb, don't we? We all come from the one life. And we're kind of stuck with that. We're kind of stuck with that. Because neither you nor anything else that is can be separated from the body of being, from the body of isness. A new word. I don't think that's a real word, but I made it up. Isness. The body of isness. Now, what is and what's here, what always was, can take on many forms, diverse times. Yet in reality, there is no time. There is only a change of form. Only a change of form. Yet in reality, there is no time. There is only a change in form. Only a change in form. And just sit with that quietly for just a moment and just kind of think about that. In reality, there's no time. Only a change in form. And as we watch the form change, that gives us the idea that there is this thing called time. But if we look deeply, we can see that there is no reality in that thought. There is no reality in time. Time is just a notion. It's just a belief that we hold so dearly, and that we actually get into a lot of discord and fights over. All the times we try to make our deadlines and all that stuff, but it's not even real, you know. But if we can walk in the awareness, if we can walk in the consciousness of everything that we see and hear and smell, and all these different forms are just forms, and they're impermanent. They're going to change, and they're going to we can sit there and watch them change and see them for what they are without the being bound to that illusion of time, you know. And just to sit and consider how impermanence relates to the illusion of time. You know, how impermanence relates to the illusion of time. How they kind of coexist with one another. How if everything just stood still, what would happen to time? But because form changes, what does that do to time? What does that do to our idea of time? And it's only when we quit keeping score of the moments and the hours and the days that we really know the score at all. It's only when we quit being timekeepers that we get in touch with the reality of the eternal that's present here right now. And as long as we're keeping score, we just never know the score. When we tally up, when we watch the clock, the day drags on, and life gets real heavy when we keep time. Doesn't it? When we watch the clock, when we keep time, when we keep score, all those minutes add up, all those hours add up, and the day just gets so heavy. It gets so hard. It gets so hard to get through. But if we're not focused on the time, we're more apt to enjoy the day, to be able to rest while we work, to take and experience more joy in what we do. And I think a lot of the joy comes from just being present and seeing things as they truly are, because we miss so much. We just don't see things. We miss so much when we're keeping score, when we're keeping time. There's so much life going on around us. There's so much good going on around us. There's so many things just to bring us into a bliss and an ecstasy and to have the fullness of joy each and every moment when we let go of the moments. Then we can just watch the farm transform, and we don't have to conform it anymore. We don't have to force it. We don't have to cage it. We can just watch the farm change. And the only certainty is that the farm will change. You can count on it, because impermanence is the nature of all things. If it's a thing, it will change. Think of all the things that you'd like to see change. And you can just rest in knowing that they will, because they will. So all the farm will change. And until we come to know ourselves as something besides a mere farm, besides just the farm, what will happen is we'll live in fear of the change. We have to see deeper. We have to get in touch with a life that is deeper than the life we watch going on outside of us. We have to get in touch with a life that is deeper and greater than the farm alone that just changes. And if we don't get in touch with that, we will live in fear. We'll fear change, because we'll see change as being death. We'll see change as being the end of existence if we're attached to the farm. And if we're attached to the farm, what we'll find is that we'll end up fighting to solidify and we'll resist that change. And as we fight to solidify and to resist change, to resist it, we will find ourselves at war with the world of change. We'll find ourselves at war with a world of change. And just think, what are wars really about? Where do wars come from? If we don't resist the change, what is there left to contend with? What else is there to contend with besides the change? And when we fear the change, we fight to be. We fight for our imagined life. And what do we get by fighting change? Change is inevitable. And because change is inevitable, wars are futile. And when you know that the change is inevitable, and see that the war comes, that the contention comes out of the resistance to change, you can see that wars are futile. They're senseless. They're not even logical. They're not even logical. We never gain peace by going to war. It just doesn't work that way. Peace begins by just allowing things to be. And that has to begin with ourselves. We have to allow ourselves the grace, the luxury, the mercy to just be ourselves at any given time. To just be. To only be. To just be. To only be. And sometimes it's good to just sit there and just be and only be and really get a sense of what that feels like, what that's like, what's that experience like. And then consider what it feels like when we try to do something more than just be. Consider what it feels like when we try to impress others. What does that feel like? What's that experience like? When we try to be what we are not. Or when we try to be something that we really aren't, but imagine that we think we should be. Yeah, we lose our peace, don't we? Yeah. And see, the thing is, when we do that, when we resist the change, that comes along with just being yourself. Now that may sound illogical, but in a sense it's sort of paradoxical, isn't it? Because to just be yourself, you have to let yourself grow to be. You have to let yourself transform and metamorphosize. You have to let yourself blossom. That's the word, blossom. In order to just be, you have to let yourself blossom. And see, a blossom isn't something that is rigid. It isn't something that's rock. It's something that it lives and moves when something blossoms. And so to just be is not a matter of rigidity. It's not a matter of harsh conformity. It's a matter of openness and just letting yourself blossom. And see, there's never any comfort in resisting who you are. There's never any comfort in the heart contracting and the flower that drawing in upon itself. There's never any comfort in that. The only time you feel true peace, that everything is just right, is when you just allow yourself to be real. When you just allow yourself to be real. There's a lot of liberty there. There's a lot of joy there. There's a lot of freedom there. When you allow yourself to just be real. For what you are blossoming into, what you are becoming, is coming out of you. What you are becoming is coming out of you. What you are becoming is coming out of you. When you can really grasp that in a visceral, heartfelt level, you will quit blaming the world outside of you for the way you feel. You'll no longer give power to others to make you feel happy or sad or right or wrong or this or that. When you realize that what you are becoming is coming out of you, you own it. You own it, and that's the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful life. Because when you own it, you finally touched reality, and you become disillusioned with the belief that other people have the ability to make you happy or sad, or right or wrong. So we don't need to resist. We don't need to resist letting ourselves just be. We don't have to resist that. We don't have to resist that we will grow old. We don't have to resist that. We don't have to resist it that our skin will wrinkle. We don't have to resist that our hair will fall out and our teeth will fall out. We don't have to resist it because it's all it's all just part of being. When things grow, they change form. Jesus once said, he said, "Let the dead bury their dead. Come and follow me." What are dead people like? What's that like? They don't change much, do they? Well, they slowly go back to dust, but besides that, they really don't. Somebody laying there dead is like just dead. That's it. It's over. It's done. It's like you don't have to worry about them changing their mind anymore. You don't have to worry about them changing their clothes anymore. You don't have to worry very much about changing when you're dead. You know? And there's the physical death, but there's also a way of being dead on the inside. When you're dead on the inside, you don't blossom. The joy doesn't come out of you. The peace doesn't flow from you. The grace doesn't manifest itself through you when you're dead on the inside, does it? And what's it like to be dead on the inside? What's it like to be a whitewashed tomb, as Jesus would call it? He addressed that to people that were hard, that were set in their ways, that had their minds made up, that had this stubbornnness about them, this indignancy about them, that they were dead. They weren't. They were dead in their beliefs about reality. They had these fixed notions about life. Because they had these fixed notions about life, they would cast stones rather than forgive. Because they had these fixed notions about life, they were ready to kill Jesus because he healed on a Sabbath day. Because they had these fixed notions. That lulled them into the state of unconsciousness. They were people at war with everything. They were people that would resist everything. They would resist everything. Have you ever been around people like that? That just want to resist everything? That always find something wrong with something? That they start out with the answer no. No, no, no. And never really say yes. Maybe. It's always no. It's always no. It's always no. And it always starts with the word N-O, no, because of what they K-N-O-W. It always starts, their first thought is always no because of what they think they know. Yeah, the ego. always saying no because of what it thinks it knows. A fixed mind, a made-up mind. But there's wisdom in being meek. There's wisdom in not resisting. Nobody can contend with the wise man because he doesn't contend. He's the kind of guy that can just be and be okay with that. And because see, it starts there. The wise one can just be and be okay with that. He doesn't contend with others. Because he does not contend with himself. He doesn't contend with others because he doesn't contend with himself. He gives himself permission to just be who he is. And comfortable with who he is, he has nothing to prove. Other people can say whatever about him, and it's water off a duck's back. It's just not going to affect him because he's already okay with himself. Only when we can let ourselves be, only when we can let ourselves be, can we let others be. We must first be okay with ourselves before we can be okay with the world around us and the people in it. We first have to sit with that judgmental voice that we beat ourselves up with. And get past that before we find the capacity to stop judging others, because the way we see them is the way we see ourselves, because in reality there's no difference. But in reality we are okay. There's really, if you can just be you, that's all that life made you to be. That's all that life made you to be. That's all that life made you to be. So this discovery of our, here's a new word for you, okayness. The discovery of our okayness that is already here, the discovery of that sense of rightness, of that sense of righteousness, that comes about by a process. And this process is a process of surrendering to the mystery. The discovery of that comes by a process of surrendering to the mystery. It's really about our not knowing. It's in our not knowing that we begin to see and awaken. As we begin not to know, we begin to see. As we begin not to know, we begin to awake. As we begin not to know, we begin to see. As we begin not to know, we begin to awake. And what do we see? What we discover, what we see, is that it's okay not to know. We see that it's okay not to know. We don't have to know. We know everything we need to be here right now, to live right now, as ourselves right now. We have all the knowing that we need in the moment. Now, when it comes to me here, as I'm saying this, I can picture the Israelites going through the desert after they left Egypt, and God would rain down the bread, the manna from heaven. And each day that daily bread would fall from the sky, and they would gather so much up, and they were told to just take enough of that to that it would get them through that day, not to store it up overnight, but just to get them through that day. And some people obeyed that, and each day they had enough manna. They had all they needed for that day. And other people stored it up and disobeyed, and the manna got rotten, and the manna caused diseases, and a bunch of them died of the diseases because they stored it up, because they didn't see that, they didn't trust that what they had was enough. Now, manna is also associated with doctrine or teaching or truth or knowledge, okay? So know that right now that you have all the manna that you need to live this day. You don't need to add a bunch of knowledge unto yourself. You don't need to store up a bunch of doctrines and teachings and chase every spiritual leader, because what you need to know is given to you moment by moment, faithfully, persistently. You can count on it by life itself. By God Himself. It's okay not to know. We don't have to know. It says we abide and spend time in awe and wonder in the not knowing. As we spend time there, we begin to get comfortable with the not knowing. But until you spend time, really sit with that not knowing, you'll never get comfortable with it. You've got to spend time in not knowing to be comfortable with it. What does that mean? To spend time in awe and wonder until you're comfortable with it. Well, it can mean many things. It might mean that you don't Google things as much. It might mean that you don't read as many books. It might mean that instead of watching the news and acquiring more knowledge through the media, that you go instead for a walk in the forest and sit by a stream and do nothing more than just only be right there, listening to the birds, listening to the water flow, feeling the sun on your skin, and just being in awe of it all. Just spending time in awe and wonder. And if you can't go out in the woods, if you can't get out in nature, there's plenty of things that can bring you awe and wonder any place you are. Your very body itself is awesome It's awesome. The whole universe follows the plan and the frame and the way that your body is. Scientists have learned so much about our universe just by looking at the human body. You're awesome. So there's a lot of it, and you don't need to know in order to live, do you? Do you breathe even if you don't know it? Funny, but that just happens all on its own without you even knowing how. You breathe. And you don't need to know. You know all you need to know to breathe. And it's enough just to know that you don't know. But why do we go after all that knowledge? Why do we pursue it so dogmatically and so insistently? Because I think a lot of it's just because we want to secure ourselves. Secure ourselves. But if we can get comfortable with that awe and that wonder, if we can spend time in not knowing, what we will find is we will stop trying to secure and fix and solidify everything. That's one of the fruits that comes out of this abiding and awe and wonder. One of the fruits is that we stop trying to secure and fix and solidify everything. We stop trying to conform the world. We allow things to transform and live. And as we abide in that awe and wonder and spend time that way, we begin to draw our security from letting things go rather than making them be. The way of the world is to make things be. That's how it gets its security. Ours, we're called to a higher way, a way of letting things go. We are secure in letting things go rather than making them be. And there's a line from the Course someplace. I'm trying to remember what it is. What is that line about? Our safety lies in what? Somebody tell me, what is it? Our safety lies in... I'm trying to think of it. It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, it'll come to me. Our defenselessness. You got it. Karen's got it. Our safety lies in our defenselessness. Yeah. We begin to draw our security from letting things go rather than making them be. And then as as this becomes part of our practice, we begin to develop this awareness. It's part of the process. This awareness of the okayness, the awareness of the righteousness. It begins to dawn upon us. The presence of the okayness, the presence of the righteousness begins to illumine us and light our way to where when we get up and go out into the world and take care of our daily affairs, that we go out into the world with this sense of okayness, with this sense of righteousness, with this sense of I belong here, I belong now, there's nothing wrong, you know? Because the righteousness is there, the okayness is there. It's simply a matter of unveiling it. It's digging up the treasure that's buried within, that's been covered over, that's been buried in the soil of this world of ideas and notions that we have. These notions and ideas that we sought refuge in, only to become disillusioned later. So there's this way of not knowing, of being okay with not knowing. And we can actually begin to see that the I does not know. Not an I as in the eye in your head, but the I as in who you think you are. Who do you think you are? Anyway, we can begin to see that the I really doesn't know. It says things like, I am this, and I am that. But the I really does not know what it is. It can't. Because it's only a form. The I is a form. And all forms change. They're in this constant state flux of impermanence. So the I cannot know what it is. It isn't real. It can't know what it is. Yet yet the I seems to be a gatekeeper. Doesn't it? Doesn't it? Yeah. The I seems to be it filters what goes into and out of our consciousness. It's like a gatekeeper. The ego, the I. And the thing about this ego and this I is the more that you resist it, the more it solidifies, the harder it gets, the denser it gets. If you see it as something being evil or bad, and resist it and fight with it, it's a self-defeating cycle, because the more you resist it and fight with it, the harder it will get. If I come up to any of you and start barraging you with a line of judgments, telling you how bad you are, you're going to contract and your ears are going to close, because the ears ain't going to want to hear that. If I come swinging at you, you're going to put your hands up and block me, because your body doesn't want to take that resistance, that attack. So it's not a matter of resisting the ego, and the ego really gets a bad rap sometimes. Now I know it's not the favorite thing and all that, but it's like the devil gets blamed for a lot of things that the devil has nothing to do with. The devil gets blamed for a lot of things that the devil has nothing to do with, and so does the ego. The ego gets blamed for a lot of things that it has nothing to do with. It makes a good scapegoat, don't it? But it's a gatekeeper. I was talking about it being a gatekeeper that filters what goes into and out of the consciousness, right? So to get past the gatekeeper, we have to win it over. It's like when you throw the water on the witch and the Wizard of Oz, and she goes, I'm melting, you know. It's sort of like throwing love at the ego. You throw love in the ego, the water of love on the ego, and it's like, I'm melting. That's how you got to get rid of the ego. You have to, the ego is the gatekeeper. It's the troll at the bridge, and if you want to get to cross over to the bridge, what you have to do is actually have tea with the troll. You have to sit and have tea with the troll. What's a tea session like? You know, you got a table and you sit on one side and somebody sits on the other and they sip their tea and they converse, they talk. And so there's this way of having tea with the ego. A way to sit in a contemplative and a meditative state of consciousness to where you're able to just sit with the ego, and as you just sit with it and let it reveal itself to you instead of fight with it, you begin to see it for what it really is. And as you see it for what it really is, it loses all of its power. When you see it for what it really is, it turns from a lion into a kitten. Then all of a sudden it just becomes your shadow. It's not the real you. So our practice is to approach the ego with gentleness, with tenderness. It's not about forcing ourselves to see. It's more about soothing away the scales from our eyes. Putting the salve of love into our eyes, not punching them out. It starts with this compassionate listening to ourselves, to where we've become aware of what we are telling ourselves about ourselves. To become aware of what we are telling ourselves about ourselves. Just listening to ourselves, non-judgmentally. To listen to ourselves non-judgmentally is an art form. That comes through practice and through willingness. Through practice and through willingness. We have to become willing to practice sitting in this field of silence and quietly wait for the beast to make its appearance. And we sit there and listen for its voice. We let it come to us. We don't chase it down. We sit in this field of silence quietly, patiently, and wait for the beast to make its appearance. We're not hunting it the way that we think of hunters go after their game. We just sit silently, we listen for its voice. We let it come to us. And in the stillness, we let go. In the stillness, we get to know the inner voices. And then we become familiar with this voice that starts its sentences with the word I. And as we sit in the silence, in that field of silence, the beast makes its appearance. And we become very familiar with this beast called I. we catch ourselves saying things like, I always screw up. I will never amount to anything. I hate this. I love this. I want that. I don't want that. I wish things were this way, that way, different. And these are the voices of judgment and lack that foster shame and despair. They are the voice of the ego. They are the voice of a wounded and armored gatekeeper. The voice of a wounded and armored gatekeeper. They're the voices of conditioning. Conditioning that comes with repetition, by hearing the same thing over and over and over and over. And as we sit in silence, we can begin to notice how this voice goes over and over and over. It cycles. And this thought form that is obsessive, this obsessive way of thinking, the cycle, comes out of that voice. And if we would only become conscious of that voice of the ego, the ego would probably bore yourself to death. We'd bore ourselves to death by the storyline that we tell ourselves over and over and over and over, because it doesn't change. It's always telling you the same old story to convince itself of what it suspects is not real. The ego is always telling itself the same old story to convince itself of what it suspects is not real. It's not real. And its voice can be compared to that, like a fly that buzzes around your head, going by your face just long enough for you to catch a glimpse of it. It goes around your face just long enough to catch a glimpse of what is annoying you and making you uncomfortable. It's not a voice that will simply let you just be. The one thing that the ego does not want to do is to let you just be. It won't let you be. It's a nagging voice, sort of like a persistent throbbing of a headache. It's a voice that makes demands. It insists that you be angry, depressed, pessimistic. That's the voice of the ego. It's the voice that won't let you be. It's the voice that insists that you be angry. So-and-so does this, you should be angry. I should be angry. You can't blame me. We have no hope. When it tells you you should feel bad. And yet that same voice of the ego that insists that you be angry, depressed, and pessimistic will also insist that you be collected and happy and optimistic. It will. It'll come to you and say, you should be at peace. What's wrong with you? Ain't you spiritual enough? You ought to be happy. Yeah, so what your cat got ran over by a car. You ought to be happy. Because spiritual people are happy. You ought to be optimistic. Because spiritual people are optimistic. So it's the same voice that insists that you be angry and depressed and pessimistic, that insists that you be collected and happy and optimistic. It really does go both ways, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. We find ourselves telling ourselves that we must be collected, happy, and optimistic because that's what's right. And as we do that, we put on this facade, and we try to convince ourselves, and we try to convince others. We wear a grin, but we wear it with a grimace. We put on this hard, fake smile, and we begin to tell ourselves it's wrong to feel pessimistic. It's wrong to be angry. Or perhaps it expects anger from you when you're really just indifferent. We tell ourselves that we should be angry about some political or social issue that we, in reality, we could really care less about. But we're supposed to be angry about it. We're conditioned to believe that it's right, the right thing to feel, rather than just feeling what you'd feel. That insistence that you should feel angry when you really feel indifferent, that insistent nagging voice, that's the voice of the ego, yeah. So what we need to see and to be free is that any insistence about what we think, how we feel, that's the voice of the ego. It's the voice of insistence. It's the voice that won't let you just be. And the ego is one with unrealistic expectations that we put on ourselves first. And then what we do is we end up projecting those expectations on others. Don't we? We expect them to conform to the thought. We expect them to conform to the form that we think is right. We tell others, you should be angry. You shouldn't feel that way. It's not right to think like that. All the voice of the ego. Why do we dog ourselves like that and beat ourselves up and flagellate ourselves and wound ourselves? Why do we do that? There's got to be some sort of a payoff. What does the ego gain from these cycles of demeaning behavior and speech? We hurt ourselves to make atonement for a perceived wrong or injury, don't we? To set things right. We hurt ourselves to make atonement for a perceived wrong or injury. And the ego is weird like that. It really is. The ego is weird like that because it will complain it does not get the things it deserves, like attention, respect, and love. That voice that complains that you're not getting the attention and respect and love that you deserve. And the same voice, the same ego will turn around and tell you that you don't deserve the attention or respect or love. Now, is that crazy or what? It will complain that you don't get the attention and respect and love that you deserve, and in the same breath tell you that you don't deserve the attention and respect and love that you want. It's self-defeating. What it recognizes is a lack of attention and respect and love. And it shames itself. It disgraces itself. It strips itself of a royal robe of grace, of that grace to just be. Then it tries to be something it's not. And that's one of the earmarks of egotistical thinking. One sure sign of it is to always be trying to be what you are not. It's a belief that's born from another belief, a belief in lack, a belief in insufficiency that brings on these desires to be what we are not. And this cycle of belief and desire perpetuates itself. And society at large is driven by the force of this cycle. It's the very life force of a collective consciousness of guilt and shame. Of what St. Paul would probably in the Bible call the body of sin. Or what Eckhart Tolle might call the pain body. It's this collective consciousness of guilt and shame. It's this body of suffering that produces more suffering. And the part of you that is part of that body is the ego. Are you your ego? I'm not saying that at all. I said the part of you that is part of that body is your ego. And it can be sensed, it can be felt. It's not very difficult to recognize when we stand back and observe it. Yet it controls us because we have become all too familiar with it. We've become so accustomed to its presence that we no longer recognize its influence upon us. Now, at a young age, when this thing called the ego was first starting to take its form, it was probably easier then to recognize it. But when it took us, since it took us over, we just don't recognize it. It's a lot like you can notice the air, but generally you don't because it's taken for granted. And the ego is a lot like that. We've become so accustomed to living in shame and guilt. We've become so accustomed to living with despair. We've become so accustomed to living with unforgiveness that we just take it for granted. Like that stuff's supposed to be there. Like it's just a normal part of life. But so it's a normal part of what life? Because the ego has taken us over so much, because we become overly familiar with it, we see its effects on us. It manifests itself in chronic stress, especially in the days we're in. People have become so used to being stressed out that they don't even know, they're not even aware of it. They go about their whole day in this fight or flight mode of operating, and it's pumping all these chemicals into their brain and system that are preparing them to either fight or run, and that chemical has so been there so persistently, so consistently, that it's just become normal to them to feel like crap. And they don't know they feel like crap because they forgot what it's like to feel good. So people are generally leading a pretty crappy life simply because they forgot what it's like to feel good, and they've accepted it. They've accepted that this high level of stress in their life. Yet the effects of that stress on the body are persistent and faithful to do the damage to the body. And how do they show up? They show up as psychological and physical ailments. People have heart attacks, diverse forms of cancer. They suffer from depression and anxiety disorders. This work of the ego just leaves us trashed, both emotionally and physically. It wears us out before our time. The ego gets what the ego does to the body is, if you've ever been in the IT field, you would be familiar with this term of thrashing of a hard drive. And people have actually written viruses to cause hard drives to do what they call thrash. And what the thrashing is it's a persistent cycle. It's a cycle, a program that they can't break out of, that just wears them out from constantly running. And that's what the ego does to us. It gets those chemicals going into the body, and to where the mind and the body are just constantly going, till it's gone. Till it's gone. And really, the only way to mitigate this phenomena is awareness. The only way to mitigate this phenomena is to wake back up and once again come to our senses and become sensitive. In a day and an age that Jesus said that the love of most people would grow cold, that the sensitivity of the masses of the people would wax cold, and their ability to feel and stay in touch with reality would diminish and die away. And what other religions would call the Kali Yuga. And so we see St. John in the apocalyptic epistles to the churches in the book of Revelation. He tells them to strengthen the things that remain that are ready to die, to give attention to the things that are dying for a lack of attention, to give attention to the things that are dying for a lack of attention. when the reason we're dying, the reason we're dying is we're dying for a lack of attention. We're not giving our attention to what really matters. We're giving our attention to the things that are unreal. We give our attention to the money. We give our attention to the possessions, to the prestige, to the positions, to the whims and desires of what other people think we should be or what we think we should be. We don't give attention to the what really where it should really go. We don't give attention to just being, only being, just here, just now, as we are, and being okay with that. And as we don't give those things the attention that need the attention, we become insensitive, don't we? We become hard. We become calloused. And we begin to lose the capacity to feel moved with compassion. It's hard to be sensitive and moved with compassion when you've got this surge of drugs, norepinephrine and epinephrine, flowing through your bloodstream like you've got a needle in your arm all day long. And then what a lot of people do is to try to escape that is they actually inject themselves with other drugs like heroin or alcohol. And that really, it may seem to reduce the stress, but it still leaves you insensitive. It still leaves you in the dark. It still leaves you unconscious. And that's the state that society is in today. They become so acquainted, so used to witnessing violence that it's become normal to them, and they're not touched by the pain any longer. They watch so many people die on their TV screens that it's just, they become indifferent to it, numb to it. Because, every time you see something like that, it seems to put a callus on the heart. And the heart becomes callous because that's hard on the heart to watch people die. That's hard on the heart to watch people suffer. In order to protect itself, these layers of calluses form. And if you've ever had a callus on your hand, you know that it makes the hand insensitive. You lose sensitivity. I can take my breath and blow on my arm over here and feel the air, very, very gentle breath on the skin there. But if I come over to my hand, I was in construction for years, and my hands have become calloused because of that. I can breathe on my hand where it's become calloused, and it's like I don't feel it at all. So that's what calluses do. When we get these calluses on our being, we become insensitive. And when people become calloused, what they start to see other people's differently than being a part of their body. They see people as becoming a means to an end. They see people as becoming objects and resources to satisfy their own desires, to acquire possessions and prestige and personalities so that they can be somebody. So that they could be somebody. Why do they want to be somebody? Why do they want to be somebody? Because they've came to believe that they're a nobody. Because they've lost touch with that just be, only be. Just be, only be. They've lost touch with the just be, only be. And they've adopted this belief that they're not, that there's this, that they're lacking something, and there's this sense of lack and shame that goes along with that has even pervaded the spiritual sectors of our society, and it feeds this desire to become some special enlightened personality. And as we feed that belief that we are not enlightened, and that we somehow lack consciousness, and could somehow awaken ourselves if we follow the latest, greatest gurus and teachers, where does that get us? It just leads us away, further away. We're pursuing something. We begin to look for something that we've always had, that we've never lost. And unless we can somehow reassociate ourselves with the reality of the present moment, with the okayness of life, just as it is. Unless we can do that, what we do is we will find ourselves being just like a drop in the ocean of a sea of grasping souls. There's this sea of people that are just grasping blindly, all trying to make a perfect world into a better place. Trying to make a perfect world into a better place. Trying to make a perfect world into a better place. That's insane, isn't it? That's insane, but isn't that what we do? Isn't that what we catch ourselves doing as we awaken? We catch ourselves right in the middle of that. And why do we catch ourselves right in the middle of trying to make a perfect world into a better place? We catch ourselves right in the middle of that thinking, right in the middle of that behavior, because waking up is a process. It comes about in stages, and when you catch yourself in the middle of it, it's like being halfway awake. When you're fully awake, it just doesn't even become relevant. You just don't do it no more. When you finally see the absolute futility of that, you just stop doing it. And that's what it's about. Being fully awake is about. Being fully awake is much about seeing the absolute futility of trying to make the perfect world into a better place. That's what waking up's about. Seeing the futility of making a perfect world into a better place. Because we try to fix and make certain things that can't be fixed. because it's never been broken. See, we try to break out of the cycle of impermanence. We try to rest on our laurels. We try to rely on our past achievements, our good works, instead of working to maintain the common good. So Jesus, Jesus said this. He said not to lay up treasure where moth and rust corrupt, and which we associate with material treasures, right? Yet often we fail to see that this includes everything that is, by its very nature, impermanent. When Jesus says not to lay up treasures where moth and rust corrupt, it's not just physical, material treasures. It rather includes everything that is, by its very nature, impermanent. What do we the things we treasure, such as being the legends that we are in our own minds. That image, that idol of the legend that we are in our own mind, that's subject to corruption. Why is it subject to corruption? Because it's the very nature of the mind to change. Our status quo of respectability is only an illusion concocted by our obese egos in their attempt to perpetuate their existence. So this rabbit hole goes deep, don't it? It gets flat out crazy in our futile attempts to control and control everything rather than just let things go. Our futile attempts to control everything, just really in the end, they simply leave us frustrated and weary. So what do we do when we become frustrated and weary? We try harder to control. and we become more frustrated and weary. And you know what? That cycle's impermanent. Eventually you wear yourself out and you'll quit. The cycle will come to that is one cycle that will eventually stop. And that's not all bad, becoming frustrated and weary, because when we finally become disillusioned with trying to control life and simply surrender to it, then the weight of the whole universe becomes lifted off our shoulders. When we can start to allow ourselves the luxury of just being, and that being enough, that's when we begin to experience great bliss and contentment. When we can just let ourselves be and let the world around us spin as it does, round and round, without forcing it into conformity. When we can let others see for themselves. They simply see when we allow them to. Why? Because it's their nature to see. It's your nature to see. If we find ourselves trying to force ourselves or trying to force others into seeing something, then we need to practice a little introspection. At those sort of times, we need to ask ourselves, what are we keeping others from seeing by trying to make them see something in particular? Yeah, Lynn, if you've got some place to go, I can always play music or something when I'm done till Devin arrives. If you have to go to the store or whatever, do what you need to. And yeah, I'm here. Don't worry. Okay, so but anyway, if we Let me get back to my train of thought. But if we find ourselves forcing others to see something, then we need to look at what we're keeping others from seeing by trying to make them see something in particular. So seeing just happens when we move the particular things out of the line of sight. When we move away the particular things out of the line of sight, then seeing just occurs. So what we have to do is we have to start to learn to trust our own and others' abilities to recognize truth on their own. You have to begin to trust your ability to know truth. You have to begin to trust others' ability to recognize truth on their own, to discover it in their own time, and give them the luxury of having minds of their own. Give them the luxury of having feelings of their own, without succumbing ourselves to the urge to correct ourselves or to the urge to correct them. That urge to correct, how it pops up and takes us over, doesn't it? Have you ever had the urge to correct yourself or others pop up and take you over? I have. But I'm becoming more familiar with it. I'm able to see it a little quicker, to where I see the urge before it takes me over, and I'm not as prone to that as I used to be. But that urge to correct, that's a powerful urge. That's one force, one urge, one compulsion that we really need to know when it's there. Know when it's there, you know. When we find ourselves driven and compelled to correct others, then it should be our practice not to speak. That's hard. Well, to zip my lip when I feel driven and compelled to correct somebody. Oh, sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, ain't it? To examine myself rather than them. to see what I'm trying to defend. To see what I feel the need to defend. To see why we somehow believe that the world turns on others' knowing and agreeing with my own personal judgments. To see that belief that the axis of the world turns on other people knowing and agreeing with my own personal judgments. So I have to practice. Not interfering. Letting people speak their minds. Letting people have feelings of their own. Letting people have a heart to do what heart's been given them. I have to practice letting others have their own delusions, have their own sufferings, and just to be there with them without trying to fix them. To just let them suffer the pain that they need. And to realize that sometimes we need pain. And life will give us pain when we need it. And it's not my business to try to rob somebody of something they need. Yeah. So love gives them space to suffer for their own beliefs and judgments, and to see for themselves the plausibility of their own perceptions, to let them eat the fruit of their own wisdom. And they don't need to be accountable to me. And why would I even think that they should be accountable to me, you know? I like a parable in the Bible, of the parable of the weeds. It's a very sharp parable. I'll read it very quickly. It goes like this. It goes, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, the enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted up and formed heads, and the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? And he goes, an enemy did this. And then so his servants ask him, do you want us to go out and pull them up, to pull up all the weeds? And he goes, no, don't do that. Because while you're pulling up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. And at that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them up in bundles to be burned, and then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. What I get out of that is that the wheat and the tares, we know better than to call things good and bad, but in this sense, just consider the parable. The good and bad grow together. The wheat grows besides the tares. And now, the wheat grows besides the tares. And it's not the wheat's position to uproot the tares. What life calls me to do is to grow side by side with the tares, side by side with the weeds. Not to separate myself. Not to go bad world, good me. Not to do that. Not to go bad world, good me. What life has called me to do is grow side by side. This calls for faith, and it calls for patience. To have a willingness to just let things mature and come into their season on their own without interfering. I don't have to save the world anymore. Rather, I can just stay in the soil that I've been planted in and just stay present. And just be willing to grow along with everything that's here. To grow along with everything that's here until we all come to maturity. And that's what this parable tells me to do, is just to grow along with everything that's here. To grow along with everything that's here, so that I can be joyful, peaceful, I can be gentle, I can be kind, because that's what I am in the midst of this crazy bunch of crazy-ass weeds. In the midst of this crazy bunch of crazy-ass weeds, I can be a joyful, peaceful, gentle, kind stalk of wheat, if I'm willing to grow along with all the things that are here in this field of the world. So I don't need to be troubled and upset by all the affairs of the state of the world. That's none of my business. I can just be here and let things be here. I can grow along with everything else. We can grow side by side together. I can just be here, only be here, and just let things be here. And that is enough. We have to understand that is enough. If we don't get it, if we don't get that that's enough, we'll try to interfere. We'll go out and start a war to try to make peace. We'll become idiots. But our safety is in our defenselessness. It has to be that it's enough just to be. It's enough just to be here growing with a stalk of wheat on one side of me and a weed on the other. And I can be with them just the way the sun is with everything. It shines on everything impartially. It doesn't set conditions. I can grow right along with everything that's here. I can grow right along with Donald Trump. I can grow right along with President Obama. I can grow right along with the terrorist. I can grow right along with the Dalai Lama. The form doesn't matter. What matters is if I can just be with what's here. And you've heard it said before that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Ever hear that before? Has anybody ever told that to you? Have you ever been told if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem? Well, perhaps they're right. But always keep in mind that the solution is not a matter of something that you do. The solution is often a matter of doing nothing at all. That's the hard thing for people. That's the hard solution for people to accept. It's not the doing something. They're willing to go to war to make peace, but doing nothing to have peace? You mean you're willing to do nothing to have peace? So sometimes the solution is a matter of not doing anything at all, just being still and knowing the stillness of being, knowing that bringing the awareness of the stillness of being itself is the solution. So the stillness itself is the final answer to all the problems. Because see, all the problems are impermanent. All problems are temporal. All problems are time-based. They're not eternally real. They change. Sometimes they get worse. Sometimes they get better. But they're bound to change because of their nature of being something that they are impermanent. Yet stillness is eternal, and the stillness ends up with the final word per se. Because it consumes all the words, and it consumes all the answers, and it resists nothing. When all is said and done, what is there? Stillness. And so it can't be resisted. It can't be resisted. When Jesus was brought before his accusers, and they wanted answers out of him, he didn't say anything. He was just still. He just stayed collected. He just stayed quiet. He didn't entertain their insistence on giving them an answer. He didn't entertain their demand to give an answer for himself. He didn't answer them with words. He answered them with stillness, with silence. And that's a great place, a great last thought to leave you with. is just to let your answer be the stillness. Let your answer be the silence. And just let that speak for itself. Thanks, guys. Unless somebody else wants the mic, I'll go ahead and pop some music of some sort on till Devin shows up.